Right, so hi everyone. So the debate that we're going to be talking about today is the computers are taking over, and this came from quite a few discussions that we were actually having last year. And I was talking to quite a few people, both inside the university and outside, about the role that IT, AI was actually having in our lives generally. So we've put this debate format together. And the idea is that we're actually just going to have a little bit of a for and against sort of discussion about where computers, where artificial intelligence is at the moment. And then there's an opportunity then for you to contribute just in terms of voting at the end, once you've actually heard the arguments on both sides. In terms of where we are at the moment, so we're going to first of all start with Lee. So Lee is Professor of Molecular Medicine here at the university. He's going to spend 15 minutes particularly talking about what we call the against argument. So really computers are not taking over. Then it was going to be Karl Downing, but he may be a little bit late. So I'm going to cover some of his notes on really the for argument, which is about all computers are taking over. And then Sue Attewell is actually joining remotely. She's from the National Centre for AI, and she's head of EdTech there. And she's going to sort of sum up the debate, sort of just picking up the main points that we've actually just gone through, and then just add their own perspective on where things are at that point. And then really about 1:20, we're going to have a little vote, just see where we are, and then just sum up at that point. Is that okay? We've got a Twitter link. So basically, if you want to tweet about the event itself, if you're on Twitter, then you can use the @Cade@UON and then hashtag AI debate. If you want to contribute to a discussion board, we've got a Padlet discussion board running, and you can access that via the QR code, and I'll also pop the link in the chat. That probably is more useful for those people that are online. And as I say, the event itself is being recorded, so anything that essentially is said through the microphones is being captured, along with any comments in the chat. Okay. So if you are essentially not talking, then just keep microphones and cameras turned off, essentially, and then that just keeps things nice and simple. Is that okay for everyone? Right. So I'm going to hand over to Lee in the first case, just to give the against argument really about why computers are not taking over.
Thank you, Rob, and hi everyone. Nice to see you all in person and online. So let's see if technology behaves itself for us. I'm going to try and flick over to my slides. Okay, let me just change the view. Okay, so yeah, welcome. I was quite interested in potentially the use of AI in my research, but also potentially in teaching. And with the advent of new AI algorithm software like ChatGPT, I think we're all thinking about if it's going to change our life. Is it going to change our life for the better? Is it going to change our lives for the worst? So the question that was posed was, are computers taking over? I don't think they are taking over. I think they will be a new tool for us to use in various aspects of our working and professional lives. And so I think I'll try and set out the argument that this is true, and you may or may not agree with me. I may even contradict myself because I'm still trying to get it clear in my head as to whether it's computers are going to take over or not. So just to start off with, I used ChatGPT this morning to help me put this together in a Padlet. And the question is, as an academic, how can I use ChatGPT to support the work that I'm doing with students? And so this is what it gave me, and I just put it into the Padlet just to make it look a bit nicer. But there are some interesting kind of themes that emerge around, well, if we start at the right-hand side, research assistance. So it might be able to help find information on a wide range of topics related to my particular area of research, and I'm a cancer biologist, so that's my area of interest, and to provide with relevant articles, books, or explanations of difficult concepts. So we were using it I was using it with a PhD student because we were talking about some aspects of data analysis just the other day, and I was trying to explain some statistical terms, and I'm not a statistician, and so that was quite helpful. It might be support around writing reports, and there are potentially some ethical issues around that depending on what the student is doing, but it acts potentially as a really useful editor that can help you with sentence construction, spelling, punctuation, grammar. Where I think it's quite interesting is around idea generation. So, often we're trying to come up with interesting, innovative ideas for either research or for teaching, and it has the potential to do some of that hard work for you, at least get you started on that process of generating ideas. For teaching and learning, it can provide students with resources to support them, maybe in the classroom. You might be able to use it to prompt discussions. Some classes we have, students are very engaged in that topic because it might be really interesting to them and they may already know quite a bit about the topic. But in some other topics, they may not know anything about that. And actually, this kind of just bridges that gap and helps get them started in perhaps a classroom discussion. And then issues around accessibility as well, and providing things like audio descriptions from images, providing alternative text for visual content, etc. I think yesterday there was the release of ChatGPT version 4.0, and I think that does things with images. So it's got, I think we're all waiting to find out exactly how that might be an improvement on the earlier version of ChatGPT. So I guess it's a case of watch this space. So as an academic, there's several broad themes in which we might be able to apply artificial intelligence, computers more generally, to support us in the day job. I kind of was looking at this, which was posted on our internal AI special interest group, and this is 20 ways to use ChatGPT, and it's from a particular web page, and there's all sorts of interesting approaches you could use for teaching and learning. And I think those of us that are interested in this will be trying it out this semester and next semester. It might be that you want students to grade the bot, so you ask your AI a question around the topic. It might be what to do with genes that are involved in cancer, for example. In my case, it produces an answer and you get the students to evaluate the quality of the answer. Is there anything they've missed out? The answer's missed out. Is there anything that you would add based on doing a bit of research in the lesson? So there's lots of examples. It can even amazingly write your lesson plan for you. So you can ask it to write a lesson plan, and it might do a pretty good job, and it might help you overcome that initial activation energy and getting started with lesson planning. So there's lots of things, that potential ways it could be used in the classroom, and I guess as teachers will be working through that in the course of the next few years. I wonder, the risk, of course, is that we end up being taught by a bot. One thing I was interested to see was whether I could make a script for my module. So this is my immunology module, SLS 3003. I could get ChatGPT to write a script welcoming us to the module, and then I could put it into another bit of software which basically plays this video. So if anyone's interested, they can click on this link and go and have a look at that. I've been tempted to play it, but I'm connected to so many things in this hybrid session that I don't think I'm going to risk it, Rob. But essentially, it's reading the script. Now the question is, am I replaceable as an academic if could you just be providing scripts to avatars that then do some kind of online teaching? I think if you look at it, you'll realize it's potentially useful for bits of information like a module welcome maybe, but ultimately I'm not convinced it would replace academics and tutors. In fact, I'm almost certain it wouldn't. But let's have a look at the things it might be useful in. So these are just a couple of things I started just putting into ChatGPT to say, can you write me, what did I say? I said, can you write an immunology-based marking rubric on this specific learning outcome? So it's an existing learning outcome on a module. Can you a differentiated rubric for students who might be failing to hit that learning outcome, or are excelling? And it's not necessarily perfect. I'd need to go in and check it and make sure, but it does a lot of the hard work in coming up with kind of differentiated learning outcomes. You've got to come up with the learning. Well, you don't even need to come up with the learning outcome, I guess, is one thing, is because you can come up with learning outcomes for your immunology module, in my case, including employability related outcomes. So they may not be perfect, and some of this is quite technical to this particular module, but it gives you a really nice starting point on potential learning outcomes you might use when you're developing a new module or thinking about how you might adapt a module in light of updating in your area. So these are some of the things I've been thinking about. I've basically been thinking, how can I use this technology in useful ways? So it might be, as I said, around rubrics. It might be around learning outcomes. It might be I need to provide a quick quiz for students on a topic. So this is on an immunology topic, and it's just come up with a bunch of kind of multiple choice questions. They're all very sensible. That came up with that in 20-30 seconds. Brilliant. Saved a lot of planning and effort on my part. Need a lesson plan? Maybe you're wanting to teach students about the immune system. It will structure out a lesson plan for you. Not to say this is a kind of a scaffold for a real lesson plan. It's not that you're going to use this and just use this, but actually it gives you some good ideas about a lesson you might want to do. So I think there's, as academics, it does some hard work for us around a number of things. With research, computers are potentially really powerful, and I actually came into it from the research side of things, interested in artificial intelligence, a kind of aspect of that called machine learning. And I was working with our computer science colleagues who know much more about this than I do, but we've got interest in using machine learning to look at predicting and classifying different cancers. And so one of our PhD students, Mahmoud, has been doing his PhD project looking at this kind of technology. So I came into it from a research perspective, but with the advent of things like ChatGPT, it may be the case that not only is it interesting and important in the context of my research, but it's also interesting in the context of research, but also just daily life, writing letters. If I want to complain about something, I can write a letter and tell ChatGPT I want to complain about the fact the buses never come on a Sunday, and it just does it very quickly. So I just want to preempt any arguments that may come from the other side of the arguments against the idea that AI is taking over higher education. I don't think AI is a substitute for human instructors, because whilst they can do, potentially they might be to automate certain tasks, they can't fully replace instructors. So for example, feedback on assessments is really useful. So you could ask ChatGPT, for example, to produce feedback on an essay a student has written on, I don't know, the role of the immune system in cancer, and it will begin to give some generic feedback, but you, having read it, may want to make a comment on the fact that they could cite and reference more extensively, or that they could use more primary sources. And you can, because it remembers the context of your earlier questions, it will rewrite it until you end up with quite beautifully written personalized feedback to students. But it is still dependent on the instructor. To say that the tools are still in development, and they are in the early stages of development, and they're experimental, and their effectiveness and reliability is kind of yet to be determined, I'd certainly say that, and it will require us to experiment with these tools and see how useful they are for students in teaching and learning, and for staff, and for our researchers as well. The tools have limitations, certainly, in their scope of ability and accuracy of their output. So on social media, lots of people are trying different things to see whether, for example, citing and referencing is accurate. Is it just making up citations and references? when I've tried it, they have been the experts in the field, and I've tried to follow up the references, and they look okay as far as I can tell. But other people have said that some of the citations and references are kind of not reliable. So we just need to be careful about things like that. They may not be able to fully capture the nuance of human communication or make decisions based on ethical or moral decisions. They're trying to build that into programs like ChatGPT, but there is the concern that you can get around that, and that's an important consideration for how we use it. The ethics of using AI in higher education, in teaching, learning, and research, I think, is still to be worked through. AI tools can reinforce biases because they're only as good as the data that they're trained on. And so for things like cancer classification, if it's looking at expression of genes in tumors, or it's looking at images of scans, you might think that there aren't really ethical issues. But if it's been trained on a predominantly Caucasian population, then it may be that it's biased to classifying cancers more accurately in one patient population versus another. So there are obvious ethical concerns around that. If we were to use it for some aspect of supporting assessment and marking, does pre-existing bias in markers, human markers, would that be translated to AI? So I think the ethics of using AI in these contexts still needs to be worked out. And I think it will be a really interesting tool to augment instruction, not replace it. I don't think it's going to replace me. I think it's going to be a really useful tool. I think it's going to cut down on a lot of my routine administration, actually, and to produce things to a high and a nice standard. But I guess what I would say is I don't know what the future of AI is, but they're becoming more popular and prevalent in higher education. I don't think they're going to take over. Human instructors are absolutely essential, and I think part of this debate really is to think about some of the limitations and potential biases of AI-powered tools when we're integrating them into higher education. I should say ChatGPT helped me with some of these comments here. Hopefully that's me arguing that it's a good thing. So I look forward to hearing the counter to that.
That's great, thank you, Lee. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip over the slides now. Unfortunately, the person who was going to present, so that's Karl, unfortunately can't be here at the moment. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to present on his behalf. So I've got his notes, and I've gone through them with him. So we will. I'll do my best to try and pay tribute to all this work that he's actually done in actually putting this together. So let me just share his slide. So you've heard obviously a good talk from Lee there on the benefits of AI and computers sort of generally. What we're going to hear now is sort of the counter argument. So basically all of the issues essentially now with computers and what the dangerous sort of side of it actually is. So I asked Karl to do this as sort of a counter to Lee, because Lee's generally a very positive person. So he's going to try and obviously sway you with his arguments. But Karl was sort of coming at it from a slightly different angle. And his reaction actually when I asked him whether he'd do this particular side of the argument was basically probably a very emphatic yes, let's destroy all humans with AI. That was his starting point. So I then thought, have I actually chosen the right person to actually have this counter argument? But I'd already committed at that point. But anyway, so here we are with his notes and stuff at the moment. So we'll see how we go. So first thing, so immediate thoughts really, and this is obviously Karl's thoughts, but actually I share some of these as well. So going to Elon Musk and his comment that AI is potentially more dangerous than nukes, and Stephen Hawking's warning actually that AI actually may replace humans altogether. If people design computer viruses, someone will design AI that actually improves and replicate itself. So we sort of sat there and sort of thought about that a little bit more. And think about how things actually happen. So the first reaction tends to be the movies. I mean, a lot of you will have seen some of the stuff that you can actually see on the screen now. Through the last 50 years, there's been many depictions of how the world's actually going to end through some of these AI. So you've seen famous movie franchise, the Terminator, where the AI actually becomes sentient, sets off all the nukes in an effort to actually protect itself. We've got the Matrix, where a war between the machine, that's the AI, and the humans, where the human actually loses and becomes batteries and their brains are wired into an AI-controlled environment. Or iRobot, where US robotics AI tries to subdue the populace, believing it was doing it to save the human populace. And even to a 70s film, actually called Colossus, where two superpowers create their own separate super AI to protect the nations. Eventually, these AI systems demand to communicate directly with each other to make sure things don't suddenly happen, and the outcome being that they actually merge and the humans lose control and become suppressed under it, again, with the threat of nukes. So nukes seem to have a reoccurring sort of theme here. So thought about it a little bit more and didn't actually like the simplicity of all of the movie references actually inside there. So Karl actually started looking around for some more real world research around this. And so he looked at supervised, unsupervised, and reinforced learning for any experiments that could actually sort of help and support the argument. This showed up some interesting issues with the famous Tay AI troll, the Microsoft AI chatbot, that actually stated, and this is the chatbot, not our own views, it stated that Hitler was right and 9/11 was an inside job. And to be fair, this was actually humans actually trying to provoke the system. So they actually taunted it to some extent to actually get it to say some of these things. Also, there was a chat GPT-3 bot back in October, which was meant to be helping doctors advise patient, and it actually suggested something far more serious. And a Japanese company which was trying to develop a better customer service robot by allowing 6 chatbots to actually interact with each other in the hope of actually learning and improving the result. And the result was actually quite interesting because these chatbots actually had to be, they started chatting amongst themselves, created their own language, which was more efficient than any of the language that we were actually using. And actually they couldn't understand humans anymore. So essentially they created their own language. And there are references and links, so we'll share these after the event if you want to follow up on any of this for yourself. After looking at the outer control experiments, Karl realized that he'd actually not looked at any successful projects. So he had looked around, found a Reg article on an AI project management system, which self-improved and used previous projects to actually complete new projects, and so was able to then control the projects more. And as more data was actually fed into it, meaning the company could actually release some of the project staff and then use some external programmers less and less, as the AI was able to actually use some of that precious data or the previous data. AI is used in warehouses where it's taken over a lot of the storage and certain parts of the picking items, with only part that the humans actually doing now is actually loading and unloading the pallets from trucks at the moment. However, that's slowly creeping into companies like modern material handling, who deal with loading and unloading of trailers. The technology has also started to be used in hospitals now, with AI-driven deliveries towards instead of human deliveries. AI is also starting to be used to look at x-rays for lumps in x-rays. And also it's checking the x-rays, but at the moment there's obviously still a human element that double checks to make sure that the result is correct, or as correct as it could be. Karl then actually looked up, or he actually used Chat GPT a little bit. You'll hear that keep coming up on these various talks to see what it actually says about can AI run out of control. And that was actually Chat GPT's response. So it basically says that there's always a possibility if it's actually not programmed or designed correctly. And you can see lots of other stuff that it said there about whether it could go out of control or not. So after reading excuse me, lots on the issue about AI going out of control, about where it's now actually intruding on the industries, Karl actually felt that the following issues are going to become very prominent in the short to medium term. So the first, these are job losses due to AI. So as AI robots actually become smarter and more dexterous, the same task will require fewer humans, and many employees won't have the skills needed for the technical roles and could get left behind if the companies don't actually upskill their workforces. You've got bias AI. So that's where various forms of AI bias can manifest themselves in terms of either data or algorithmic bias to human bias from the developer that's actually focused on the goal during development and losing sight of the overall picture. You've got autonomous defense systems controlled by AI. So that's obviously long been looked at in the movies. And at the moment, there's still a person who tends to actually push the necessary button, even though it's AI that's used to somehow make the decision to advise what should actually happen at that particular point. You also got financial and economic crisis caused by AI. So the financial industry has become more receptive to AI technology's involvement in everyday finance and trading processes. As a result, algorithmic trading could be responsible for our next major financial crisis in the markets. There have been reports of it causing minor crashes on certain company stocks by mistake, and sometimes it means that they have to restore or actually stop those drops. So people actually have to start intervening at those points. The most dangerous, Karl sort of summarized, was actually social media manipulation and surveillance. He felt that this could actually be excuse me, very dangerous, as it can manipulate events, political views, and even emotions. A 2018 report on the potential abuses of AI lists social manipulation as one of the top dangers of artificial intelligence. As an example, TikTok actually runs on an AI algorithm that saturates the user's feed with content related to previous media that they've actually viewed on the platform. Criticism of the app actually targets this process and the algorithm's failure to actually filter out harmful and inaccurate content, raising doubts over TikTok's ability to actually protect its users from dangerous and misleading content. Taking this further, if you added a self-learning AI to social media and an ideology to that, it means that AI is now teaching, rewriting, and evolving itself. Karl thinks that this actually could be the deadliest of combinations, and this will be the AI would actually be teaching itself and can break out of the original idea to the point that manipulations could be indistinguishable from and could even become the truth just by people repeating the same idea. With the levels of evolution, the system could systematically merge with other AIs, controlling more and more due to its campaign. Again, you asked the question, what's the problem with AI and ideology? And again, you can see the response on there. So the top line just sort of says the problem with AI and ideology is that AI can be programmed to reflect and amplify biases, where the result is actually that the AI system can perpetuate existing social and economic inequalities. His final idea, and this was his quote generated, Karl's quote generated from just reading lots of articles around this particular subject, is a little bit sort of thought-provoking. So the takeover by AI is inevitable. However, it will be either pleasant or destructive, and at the moment we just don't know which one it's actually going to be. So quite a sombering thought there from Karl to finish off, actually. So that's the end of the sort of the pros and the cons side. And now what I want to try and do is to hand over to Sue from the National Centres for AI to just sort of sum up some of the positives and the negatives that we've actually been talking about, and just also to add in her own perspective really, and also the National Centre for AI. So I'm just going to hand over to you, Sue, if that's okay.
Thanks, Rob. I think we've had quite a lot of food for thought there. So we started out with the kind of case against the robots taking over, and I think lots of positives, both in personal life and academic life. So things like time saving, reducing the admin. I mean, who can't wait for things to disappear, the dross? But I think even there, areas for concern. I'm not going to take this consecutively, more kind of mix them in. And I think, areas for concern. So one of the positives was about using AI for creativity, and it's really good for getting that creative process working. But I think the danger is, and because it's early days, is, you know, if we're all using this kind of thing, the same thing to stimulate creative thought, to help us improve our writing, are we all going to start sounding the same? So I think, you know, something to think about there, about how these things are developing. And hopefully, as more things develop, it'll start to become wider and those kind of things will be overcome. But we're still very early doors at the moment. So I think one of the key things for the case against was that this is not about replacing the human. It's not about replacing the academic, but more about supporting them, making their life easier and enabling them to focus more on the really value add interactions with students and improving. And again, I think the negatives come in here around things like bias and manipulation in the tools that was being used. And I think it's becoming even more important there for academics and people to have the time to understand critical thinking. You know, we saw this very much with COVID. You know, lots of COVID naysayers and people that refused vaccines and thought the whole thing was just a propaganda exercise. You know, it's because of where they're getting their news and not understanding how to assess sources, how to decide what's valid, what should be believed, what shouldn't. We don't teach this, and we don't teach it early enough. This is, you know, it's a life skill, not a study skill. So I think overall, you know, my thoughts are there's valid points on both sides. You know, this is not a for, it's not an against. Really, it's about, it's mixed, it's early. We are, and I think the important thing, I mean, this came up in the against the robots are taking over, but I think it's just as valid for, is that ethics are important. And there's some work being done already, but there's still work needed. And there's still research needed into what works, what doesn't work. We're getting a lot of tools, certainly our view in the National Centre, and hopefully you're all familiar with the National Centre for AI. If not, I'll drop the mailing list and the website into the chat. But we started with our maturity model, and we've used that to kind of shape our thinking. And really, most institutions were at and education was at the very early understanding phase. ChatGPT really sped up that understanding and awareness phase for us. And there's been a lot more talk. There's been a lot of focus in the media about assessment and essays and things being dead. But when you think about it, there's been a lot of discussion about assessment needing to change over the last, well, as long as I can remember, if I'm honest. And assessment needing to change to be more authentic, more learner friendly. So, you know, this is not a new problem. This is just about how maybe, and I say maybe, a new technology might be able to help, but it's still about the pedagogy. It's about the academics driving the subject. But most institutions are at the early stage. I think the whole of education and AI is at that early stage. And certainly our messages as a National Centre really about, certainly now and in the short term, it's about embracing the technology and adapting it to understand it. It's being built into the tools we use. So, you know, Microsoft has invested heavily, as have Google, and lots of other. So it's coming. It's going to come to Teams. It's going to come to things we use. It's already in PowerPoint. It's already embedded in Outlook. It's being embedded in things that we use in our daily lives. So really, it's about spending the time to understand it and thinking about the impact. I tried something the other week and I was thinking, oh, this is really great. It summarises things, makes it really easy. Then when I reflected on that a couple of days later, I'm like, oh, that's maybe not so great. For me, that was how I learned. That was how I did my revision, was about summarising and creating bullet points. So having an AI do that for me, that's going to stop me learning. So it's about understanding what it can do, what it can't do, and the fact that understanding it's still changing. We're not there. So, and I think taking the view that detection will identify it is also not really a goer. Where detection exists, so will tools to beat the detection. So it's something we're not promoting to get into the arms race because it's pretty much unwinnable. But I think our message is not to feel that you have to rush into using it in teaching. Things are changing so fast. It's more about understanding it and reflecting on it and thinking about the pluses, thinking about the minuses, having the discussions. I think it's really important that as a sector we have lots of discussions, we hear lots of voices, and that research starts to take place into what works under what situations, so which use cases are valid and which use cases aren't. So I'm going to finish with that note that it's neither for nor against, it's mixed.
Thanks very much, Sue. So what I've done is I've launched a poll, and obviously the people that are online can complete this hopefully straight away. So hopefully you can see the poll on your screen. So please click whether you generally agree, disagree, or abstain actually with that at the moment. And what we'll do in parallel with that, we'll actually do the same poll with the people that are physically in the room. So Jenny's going to help me actually with this. So just first of all, can I just make sure that the people online can actually complete the poll okay? Is it working okay in terms of people actually being able to vote? Yep. Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. So if you just vote on that, please. And then what we're going to do is in the room. So if you agree with that principle that the computers are taking over, if you can raise your hand in the room. Jenny's gonna just toss up. Okay. If you disagree with it, shall I just scribble down the numbers, Jenny? Or you got something? Okay, and then abstain. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so what I'm going to do is just close the poll. We're saying because I'm okay, so from the online, we had 9 agree. And how many in the room, Jenny? 2, okay. So 11 at the moment agree with that, actually. 29 online disagreed, okay. And 6 abstained, 4, okay. So it looks like the disagree takes it today. So the computers are not taking over. So for those people that we've got a little bit of time, so a little bit of ahead time at the moment. So for these people that abstained, either perhaps online in the first instance, did you want to come on the microphone and just say a little bit about why you actually abstained? So I'm just going to enable microphones on here at the moment. So just give me a second. And then if you want to actually come on the microphone, if you raise your hands, please, and then we can invite you to actually to speak. If there's nobody online, is there anyone in the room physically that wants to ask a question or just make a comment generally on what you've actually heard today? And what I'll do is I'll repeat it back into the mic just for the people.
AI is a gray area as it is because it generally depends. It all comes down to human ethics, how actually a human uses it. Because you see, who is making this AI? Who is making the software? We developers are making it, right? And companies are actually implementing it. The worst thing that can happen is that AI will get out of hand. Out of hand in the sense means that it is doing 99% of the work which a human can do, which will reduce the workforce. So government at the end of the day had to do a reservation system like it does for women right now or for minorities, right? So it really depends on human ethics or how they pursue this. If someone wants to build a robot army right now to attack or cyber attack China or any other country, they can do that. Everybody has that power who knows development. Right? It really comes down to how you use it. And there are good people in the world, there are bad people in the world, anything else happen. And the most important thing is we must resist the power which is present in the hands of a developer. So that is the most important topic which needs to be focused upon rather than why, because if you disconnect a laptop from hotspot and wires, even if it has a malicious software, it can't do anything. Right? It all comes down to human ethics at the end of the day. Have a good one.
Thank you. So I think your tutor, Dr. Moo, I think was listening in on that as well, actually. So it's okay. Was there any question that you wanted to ask? Actually, I might just need to repeat it on the microphone. It's okay. there was a lot of information there, actually. Yeah, do you want to just ask the question, and then obviously. It's just if you want to ask any of us, really, any question or just a comment, really. Yeah, okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments at all, really, either online or in the room itself? No comments at all. So, okay, so I'd just like to wind up by thanking Lee and Sue, obviously, for their contributions today, and for Karl in his absence for writing me this script, and obviously for Jenny for coordinating the event itself. Sue's actually put in the chat the link to the National Centre for AI, so if you want to follow up with them on any particular item, then certainly the links are in there as well. So we'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and we will stop the recording, and thank you very much.